So you just saw the montage about us at Luther Rock, which is a fun time. Some of the youth leaders and I went up to play with kids up in the mountains, which is a great opportunity to open your eyes and see what God is doing. And then the week before that, I went with some of our missionaries to Baton Rouge to do a mission trip. So it is really nice to be home. I got a good night's sleep. My neck does not hurt this morning. It is wonderful. Thank you, Jesus. We went to Baton Rouge, to actually a little town outside of Baton Rouge, to a floodplain, to work on Miss Mary's mother's house. That's how we called it while we were there. Miss Mary was our contact person. It was her mother's house. She had lived in this floodplain. And actually what ended up happening, I didn't realize, I thought it was a hurricane. It was not a hurricane. It was just a front, just like a normal storm that sat and sat and sat and sat and sat, and just rained all over this place and just kind of moved up. And because they're so far south of the nation, as the storm moved up and flooded everything north, all of those northern floods found their way south to continue to flood Miss Mary Mother's house. She's an older woman. The house got flooded, and everything in it got flooded. And the best that she was able to do was find some guys in the neighborhood to kind of take all of her possessions and put them into 2 exterior rooms, where for the last 10 months they decided to rot, as you can imagine. So our job was to go in and kind of pull everything out. And part of the job was to clean out the house, and the other part of the job was to do the real dirty work, which is to take the photo albums that just can't be seen anymore, all the mementos, the quilts from ages made, and put them in a fire. Because they were rotten, and they weren't going to be good for anybody, and she just couldn't do it. So our job was to clean out her house so that she might be able to start again, and we were going to knock down walls, and we were going to put better walls up, and we had it all worked out that we might go and be God's hand, because the best part about the mission trip isn't the good that you do in the world. I'm being selfish here. The best part of the mission trip is to see God. When you go out into these extremes and you do these things, you get to see God working in your life. You get to build up treasure in heaven, and that's nice, and you get to work with people and share God's love, and that's nice. But really, I go for selfish reasons. I go because I want to see God at work. Because I understand, and I've seen it happen. God compensates for faith. I want to back up here and be really clear about a few things. The first is, this isn't an if-then. It's not if you go and you do mission work, then you have salvation. So let's be real clear. This isn't about salvation. And the other thing is, God doesn't work in a storm. He doesn't bring a storm in and say, okay, now that I have a storm, I've destroyed everybody's lives, I've given you an opportunity to earn your salvation. Again, God doesn't work in the storm. You don't earn your salvation. So I just want to be really clear, because it can get muddy when we do that, because I wanted to talk about rewards, which is what our gospel reading was about, the rewards that we get. And the reward for me and for anybody else who goes on these mission trips is a righteousness, is to be in the very vein of God, to do His work, to be His hands, which means we receive His blessings when we go and we do these things. And the biggest reward is to see God's hand. Don't you all want to see His hand? Isn't that the thing? Isn't that the thing? If you could have anything, if you had proof, tangible proof, if you had a letter written in God's own hand says, yep, that would be it. You wouldn't need much more else in the world. Just think about all the things in your life that you have questions on. If you knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that if you took a step off of the Empire State Building, that you would be caught by God's angels, and then you did it, what else would you need in the world? That's what a mission trip is. It is the opportunity to see God's hand, to be caught by His angels. And it happens every time without fail. So much so that I've become accustomed to it. I expect it even anymore. I count on it. And we came rolling into Baton Rouge on a Sunday. We left early, a couple Sundays ago from this parking lot. And we rolled into Baton Rouge and we got our accommodations, sleeping on Red Cross cots. After the disaster came in, FEMA arrived and they handed out cots, and eventually these cots found their way to this church. This is a Baptist church, and this church was the Highland. And about 1.5 miles diameter around this church, so about 3/4 mile radius, was dry. which means everybody and anybody who could make their way to the church made their way to the church. It was the only place to survive. And of course, FEMA ended up finding its way to the church as well and handed out cots for everybody to sleep on. And the church, which is really about the size of our church, was holding hundreds of people during the day and during the night. No air conditioning, y'all. I'll just let you think about that smell for a little bit. We ended up finding ourselves on those exact same cots, except we had little mattresses that we could use. Some people brought some blow-up mattresses. And we got there, and there's this guy, Robert. And about 10 months ago, when the storm came in, Robert ended up staying at the church, just kind of managing all the people, and he's been there ever since. Because there's just been this parade of people coming through. After FEMA left, after the government decided that lives weren't on the line anymore, there was still a lot of work to do, and that work ended up being, clearing out Miss Mary Mother's house. And Robert was the one who orchestrated it. So he would go around, and he told this story. I heard it 3 times at different meals that we had. He and other people of that Baptist congregation would go around to the houses, and they would collect goods for people to eat, to clean, to do all the things of life. And he said, and I quote, "And everybody gave something whether they wanted to or not." Not sure what that means, but all right, Robert, way to go. Okay, good. There's this prayer that Jesus prays. He says, "I hope that you are one, and I know that you will be, as the Father and I are one, you will be one." Which is a really weird prayer because there's all these denominations, but we show up in the middle of this Baptist church with this guy, Robert, telling us about how all these churches have just paraded through there in the last 10 months. And we look around, there's other churches with us, other churches in this Baptist church. There's a Presbyterian congregation that came to do this mission work, and a Mennonite congregation that came to do this work. I mean, if we had a Catholic denomination there, we would have had people who 500 years ago during the Reformation would literally have killed each other all together in the same congregation doing God's work. Now, there's something special. We look at all the division in the world, and you go out to places that need God, and there are His hands and His feet. And you sent congregation members out from Crossroad to be representatives of God in that area. God is active, and Robert was bragging about God's activity. We would sit down for meals, and we'd have meals, and Robert would tell us all about how people would just have amazing, miraculous experiences over the last few months. How God would show up and just do things that were not possible. People would just be amazed. Their whole lives would be changed. We would interact with people whose lives would be changed. Resources that shouldn't have been available all of a sudden becoming available. Just amazing stuff. I was really excited because, here it is. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what I've been waiting for, to see God at work. And then all of a sudden we get this notice that there's a hurricane forming. See, I had my eyes set on this woman that we were working with. She had this hardened heart. She was all kinds of entitled, y'all. I'm pretty sure, okay, this is my sin. Hear my sin when I tell you this. I'm pretty sure that she found some insurance money from some flood somewhere and got herself a really nice car. And she rolls up in a really nice car as we're there to do service work for her grandmother. Now, how is it she left her grandmother high and dry in the flood while she's driving around with a $60,000 vehicle? I thought for sure this is where the miracle is going to be. I would have put money on it, as a matter of fact. I would have said, hey, this one's going to have a come-to-Jesus moment. She's going to have an experience with God. He's going to get into her life and just make her see all kinds of things that I'm never going to be able to relate, that nobody around her is apparently ever going to relate. She's going to have a breakthrough. And then that hurricane, or that depression, started forming into a tropical storm and started making its way north. And we're in a flood zone. The reason we're where we are is because one of these things happened already before. We're getting a little worried. Now, I remind you, storms are not how God moves in the world, but even in those storms, God can move. Romans tells us that even everything, even the bad things in the world that aren't God's, He can move even through those things. And we know that God tests people. If you remember your Old Testament, you know that Abraham had one son, and God asked him to go up to the mountain and sacrifice him to see, would he be willing to go all the way? So we're in the midst of this storm bearing down on us, and we have a group of youth who are with us, and we have a group of adults, mothers, spouses, parents, and I call a little emergency meeting, and I say, look, y'all, we're going to figure out what we're going to do. We're either going to have to race across the nation as this storm comes up and get beat down by it in a car on the highway, or we're going to have to stand here, hunker down, and hope that we don't become part of the problem. Which is, again, not a place you want to be. I don't want to be there without electricity, wondering what I'm going to eat, wondering if I'm going to survive. At this point, it looked like this thing was coming right at us, and for the record, it came right at them. That church probably was the only high land around after everything was said and done, after that storm went around. And you know what was going through my mind at the time? I'll be honest, this is a little vulgar, y'all. Please bear with me. I was pissed at God. I was mad. I was super upset. I've said in front of this congregation, in front of all of you, I brought missionaries to this place to show God's hand at work. I was ready for the miracles. I was excited for God's hand to show up, and the storm stole it from me. Sounds a lot like life, maybe. I wanted God to change that woman's heart. I wanted everybody that I brought up there to see it. I wanted her to experience it. Robert had been bragging for days about all the ways in which God had been working in that very site. This is our first mission trip. Lord, I need this one to go well so that everybody can believe you, that they can see that you act in these ways. We got youth coming. I want their lives to be changed for the rest of their life. And now I got to worry about my own life, about how am I going to get out of here? What are we supposed to do? Tropical Storm Cindy was dropping tornadoes. We couldn't even go out to work in the beginning of the day because we were in a tornado watch. And although it wasn't necessarily in our area, they thought it was safe and prudent to stay in the church, which is when we started having this meeting and had to have our own come to Jesus moment. We're in a floodplain, in a Baptist church, in the sanctuary, having a meeting about how it is we're going to save ourselves from the floodplain that we came to save others in. And we grabbed hands, and we prayed for protection, and we fled. We ran as fast as those 6 cylinders would carry us. And I had the radar up, and I was looking for the storm, and we packed as quick as we could, and we got in that car, that truck, and we moved across I-10. It was 4 hours before I figured out what was going on. John, would you show the first picture? That dot is where we are. What you don't see is the 4 hours to the west of that dot. There was a huge storm that moved up in a small little sliver that we happened to sneak out through. In the middle of a tropical storm, we were driving on dry land. And we were pacing the storm. You see that string of storms that is just below us? How about the next slide? Yeah, it got stronger, but we were right in front of it the entire time. Going over one storm, ducking under another, till we stopped right there. That's where we stopped in Pensacola at a McDonald's to take shelter because there were literally tornadoes dropping around us. So we wanted to ride out. Not literally in a car, but maybe in some kind of place that had 4 walls, just in case. I mean, just in case, you don't know. We had lunch. Leanne, our driver, who was inspired by God, given the fortitude, the mettle to push through these things, because I can't do that. Have you ever driven in this kind of weather? It is not a happy place. She took a nap. She took a nap as the rest of us were hiding out. Our phones are going off. I don't know if you know what it's like to be near a tornado. Your phone automatically goes off. The weather advisor just does that wah sound. Our car was going crazy. We stopped. How about the next slide? But we took off, made it into Florida. Even the little storms, I don't know if you can see the little storms. Even the little storms were hunting for us. And at that point, Leanne said, Pastor, just turn your phone off. It'll be all right. And I did. And it was. We ducked and dodged and weaved through big, huge hurricanes and storms and tornadoes and thunderstorms and lightning. And that's when I realized that there was the hand of God. In the midst of the storm, we were tested whether or not we would bother to trust Him. Looking at a tropical storm, our faith got pushed. And we had to walk out of the Empire State Building and say, God, please, only you at this moment can be our rock. And we fled, and we survived. And our reward is great. And so somewhere along the line I asked Brooks, I said, hey, do you think we could play Once in a Lifetime, which is a song we just played? It's not a worship song. It doesn't sing any praises to God. But it is an interesting song because it has these lyrics, and the point of the song is very clear. Removing water at the bottom of the ocean is a fruitless task, a futile effort. Removing the water in the bottom of the ocean is never going to get rid of the water, but those are the lyrics that we just heard. How did I get here? Same as it ever was. 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 Which is to remind us that we find ourselves in these places. How did I get here? It's the same every day, going on and on, doing these fruitless and futile tasks, lost in the everyday. And I want to remind you that there is a grand plan for you. That meanwhile, as you're wondering how you got there, in the midst of all of the storms that are popping up around your life, there is God, testing you in your faith, reminding you that He is in control. Not you, not me, not our bank accounts, not our insurance plans. None of the things that we set up in our lives have any control with how it's going to go, because the storms will come and your faith will be tested and you will be rewarded. We don't find God because we chase Him. You can't go out of your way to find God and see Him. You find God because you followed Him. And the reward is a dividend of faith, not some reward for services paid. It's because you followed, and there is reward. Not just in heaven, not just building up for yourself all these good things in heaven. There's reward here and now. As you are faithful to your Lord, you will find health, you will find wealth, you will find safety. And it is easier to see God and His hand from the outside, but it is no less real in the storms that you find yourself in every day, that you will find yourself in today. As you question, should I get Amish potato salad or mustard potato salad? Those little storms are bigger than you think, maybe. Bring God with you to the grocery store. You will be rewarded. When you find yourself in times of joy, bring your faith. You will be rewarded. Life in Christ is a faithful life. And a life of faith has dividends. And the reward is waiting for you to be claimed. It's yours to be asked, to receive, and without end.